Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here for Penny Black, and we have a new video series coming up called Flowers and Frames. But before we started that video series, I wanted to share with you kind of a behind the scenes look at how my creative process for creating cards. And this really stemmed from in the last few years with some creative feelings that I had. So if this sounds familiar to you, I would love to know kind of information overload, very busy, and sometimes overwhelmed, which means I needed more creative outlets. But this information overload made it hard to make creative decisions and I'd get distracted. I'm very busy, so it's hard to start or find the time to create, or easily overwhelmed kind of made me want to crave rote tasks. So what changed in card making for me was learning to and starting to batching tasks that use similar tools, working assembly line style but in ways that weren't boring, kind of looking for non thinking creative activities for those times when I just wanted something rote to do but still be creative, being able to create in small bursts of time, and permission to create without a finished card in mind. So, for this Flowers and Frames video series coming up, I wanted to share with you how I approach this, and maybe this is something that might be interesting or helpful for you. So, first of all, I like to pick a theme. It could be sketch, it could be a product focus to kind of narrow what I'm working on. So, like I said, this is going to be a Flowers and Frames theme, which you'll see on these cards throughout here. Also, I prep for each card using an envelope, and another tip is not to prep too many envelopes in advance. So, like 6 or 7, for 6 or 7 cards, I find is enough where I'm not getting bored. Another tip that I like to do is to print out or draw or put my inspiration card or sketch right on my envelope. You can just print it out and tape it to your envelope or draw it right on your envelope. And what this does is when you go to create with what you put in there, you can remember what you were planning with those items in there. And for me, it also prevents getting on technology, phone, computer, when I go to create looking for inspiration. That doesn't waste my creative time. And if you love how the card turns out, you can just save that envelope and do it again. Now, another thing, if you don't like this process and you like to make cards one by one, please just do that. You can ignore this one and enjoy the videos when they come up. So my first step in creating these cards was to choose my frame. So if you want to do flowers and frames with me, look through your stash or look at these new items and pick out some frames. I picked 3 just so I wouldn't get bored. So I have curvature, our delicate octagon, and our waves, and I'll link everything for you down below. Next, I chose my flowers. Now, I wanted to have some variety with my flowers, with my technique. So I'll show you here what I chose. First, I looked at a category of stamping, so I grabbed some brushstroke stamps. These are our Treasured Trio, Pas de Deux, and Flourishing. I also wanted to do some 3D embossing folders, so I grabbed our Orchid and our 3D Blossoms and some die cut flowers. So I grabbed Layered Bloom and Company of Flowers. And you can see now I'm using a variety of items, but still kind of batching what I pick in the category that I'm batching it in. Then the next step is to have a die cutting session or multiple die cutting sessions. And this is great for those creative times when you want to be creative but you don't want to think. So you can just sit down and just cut and cut and cut, turn on a TV show or a podcast, or if you just have a little bit of time, you can just do that. So some things to consider is the size of the frame you want to do. So think about what kind of cards you want to make and the size of your focal point. So if you've picked out those flower stamps, that can kind of help you decide which frames you want to cut. The other cutting considerations is to think of are your paper choice. So consider the technique that you're going to do. So if I'm doing brushstroke stamping, I'm going to want to cut Strathmore Bristol smooth paper. That's what I like for that. With 3D embossing folders, I like my watercolor paper. And with ink blending, I like the Strathmore Bristol smooth paper. So you know your techniques and what you like, but that's what I like, and so that's what I used as I did my envelopes. And like I've been mentioning, I keep things really simple and I just use regular old envelopes. You can buy a whole bunch of them at Walmart, and this is what I use to store. So after I had my die cutting session, I wanted to show you what was inside of my envelopes, one for each card. You can see here I have a panel. This is a single panel of a standard size card. I've cut my wavy frame. I also grabbed our Baroque embossing folder. This was a scrap that I had in my stash, and I thought, oh, you know what, I'll throw that in there. And you can see I did cut that wavy frame 3 times because I like to glue them right on top of each other for a thicker, more dimensional frame. That's optional, but what I like to do. And then with this frame, I thought, oh, these flowers, this treasured trio set would work perfect with this. So I knew I was cutting everything from Bristol smooth paper, and I'm going to use that throughout the card. And then just for some background stamping, I keep these background stamps in a drawer. I leaned over and grabbed that, and I stuck all of that into the envelope. This next one is cut from the Strathmore Bristol Smooth using that wavy frame die. And that I thought would work beautiful with this flourishing stamp set. And then I like a little background stamping, so I grabbed our footnotes. And I'm going to stick all of that back into that one envelope. Next, I've cut our curvature die, and I did this with the Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper because I'm going to be doing the stamping using brushstroke stamps. Again, multiple frames cut, and I kept the inner pieces on all these frames too, and that's what's going in the envelope. And then I had that flower stamp that I'm going to use, the Pas de Deux, that I'm going to put inside, and then that Nature's Paintbrush background stamp. Stuck that all in the envelope. Now I'm not done yet, but I wanted to mention all these envelopes that you're seeing, I'm going to have a video for each one showing how to make the cards. So please be sure that you're subscribed, hit the bell notification, and I'll put a link down below. Penny Black has a free club you can join, and you'll get an email with each video if you prefer to find out that way. So I'll link all of that for you down below, along with all the products I'm using to prep. So here's my next envelope. I have switched over now to my watercolor paper because I was thinking, oh, I want to use my 3D embossing folders. So there's my card panel, my frames. I kept the interior piece. And then I went ahead, I had out my die cutting machine. I went ahead and did my embossing right then. So again, this is also handy if you're working in a small space, which I am. I can just have that one tool out, the embossing and the die cutting machine at one time and get it all done and then put it away for the next step. So this is again on the Canson watercolor paper, and I am doing the 3D embossing folder. And I have our delicate octagon frame cut, kept the interior piece, and then this is the 3D blossoms embossing folder, already embossed, so it's ready to go, and all of that will go inside of that envelope. Now I've switched back now to the Strathmore Bristol Smooth. You could also just use any kind of smooth cardstock. For me, I'm going to be doing ink blending, so any smooth cardstock works well. And I am using my die cut. So again, there's that wavy frame. Love that in all the sizes. And then this is the Company of Flowers die. I cut it out and popped it in the envelope. And then we also have that delicate octagon die. And I've cut that out, kept the interior piece again. This is on Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper. And I actually kept an outer piece. So the next size up, I kept that inner piece. I hope that makes sense. So I could layer the frames on top. And then there's all the pieces that go as part of that layered bloom die cut. So all my envelopes are now ready to go. I put them in just like a photo box to store them. And everything is prepped. So anytime now, even if I just have a little bit of time, I can pull out one envelope and everything I need to make a card is right there. And I just find this process has really changed card making for me. I don't have to make a lot of decisions. There's rote tasks to be creative when I don't want to think. And I just love that I can also work in short bursts of time. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe. I'd love to know your feedback. Do you do this? Do you prefer one card at a time? I just love hearing other people's creative process too. So leave me some comments down below. And again, I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to sharing with you the how-to tutorials for each one of the cards that are prepped in these envelopes. Thanks for watching.